Hi, everyone. My name is Aisha, and I'm the owner of My Signature Scent. I wanted to give you guys a little bit of perspective of a vendor being at the Pinners Conference, and specifically at the Atlanta, Georgia Pinners Conference. So let me just give you a little bit of background about my business. I have a perfume studio, and we have a mobile perfume bar. So in this mobile perfume bar, people can create their own perfumes very quickly. So just to give you an idea of what I had when I was there, so you can understand the perspective that I was coming from. I was selling perfume. So I had seen an ad for the Pinners Conference on Instagram, and I was immediately drawn to it, not only as a consumer, but of course I had my business glasses on too. So I was able to think this would be a great thing for me to do for my business because of the craftiness of it. It's designed for people who are into Pinterest. So clearly they're very crafty because of that. So I figured that they would really appreciate what my business does. It would be a great target market. So I decided to do a little bit of research because after doing enough events where they just are not great, you kind of start doing a lot more research and seeing if the things that you need or have identified as being good for a successful event are at these events. So I wanted to do a little bit of research to find out more information about the Pinners Conference. But I really didn't see a lot. I didn't see a lot from a vendor's perspective, and I didn't see a lot from the Atlanta, Georgia conference specifically. And I say that it's really important because they have several different locations for the Pinners Conference, but every location is very unique. So I really wanted to see what it was like in Atlanta. So I wanted to do this video to give anybody in the future who is considering doing this conference a vendor's point of view. Okay, so as far as the crowd, it was a 2-day event. The first day was on Friday. And I didn't really expect Friday to be a very busy event because it was during the school year. People work on Fridays. However, I was pleasantly surprised when I got there and there was a long line and everybody was ready to go. They actually opened it up 30 minutes early for VIP to come in. So Friday was surprisingly pretty busy. I would say that when the classes started, that's when it started to thin out. You could visibly see the floor thinning out when the classes were in session. So the classes are one thing that people come for. There are so many classes that are there. They're so unique. And people come and they kind of schedule what classes they want to see. So naturally, they're going to be in class. And it can give you a little bit of a break so you can, restock or eat or something like that. But there are so many classes that you can definitely tell when class is in session. So it got pretty slow when class was in session. Okay, so that was Friday. Saturday, everybody was telling me about, they were hyping it up, saying Saturday was going to be crazy. It was going to be nonstop. And by all accounts, you would assume that a Saturday would be busier than a Friday. So Saturday actually was busier than a Friday, as far as you could look out on the floor and see that there were more people than on Friday. However, sales were not necessarily reflected in that number of people. And my conjecture is just that it's a 2-day event. The same people come Friday on Saturday a lot of the times because there were so many people who had come from out of town. We saw people who were there from Nashville, Greenville, Indiana, several parts of Georgia. So it was the crowd had come in for it. I mean, people were getting hotels and things like that. So naturally, they're going to come on Friday and they're going to come and still be there on Saturday, especially because, like I told you, they have classes. So they want to take classes both of the days. So the number of people could be a little bit misleading because you're looking out on the floor and thinking like, wow, it's just so many people, but it's not being reflected in the number of sales that you're getting. So sales wise, Saturday was a little better than Friday, but it wasn't as nearly as expected. And it wasn't just me, because I did ask other vendors who had come back who had been there previously. And I will say that there are a lot of vendors who return. And that's a good thing because it lets you know that it was successful for them in the past. So this particular year in 2024, there were people who were saying like, yeah, it was not like this last year. Someone said, oh, last year at this time, my sales were much more. And I overheard someone in the bathroom who was saying, oh yeah, there are a lot of people on the floor, but the sales, it's just not a lot of sales. So that was kind of, I'm not quite sure why that happened, other than, like I said, the same people were there and they had come for the classes more so than buying. So that was one thing that was interesting. Okay, so the demographic. Let's talk a little bit about who was in the house. It was a good age range. I would say probably the majority were between 30s and maybe 60s and 70s. And that was a really interesting thing that kind of stood out to me, is that there were a lot of older women at this event. And that's another thing. There were a lot of women at the event. And it was to the point where there were so many women at the event that they actually turned the men's bathroom into a women's bathroom. So that gives you an idea of just how many women there were on the floor. But as far as the age range is concerned, there were a lot of older women. I saw a lot of mothers and daughters, and I mean adult mothers and daughters. On Saturday, there were people who had brought their younger children, but it wasn't a whole lot of children. But there were a lot of mothers and daughters who were there together, and in 60s and 70s, I would say there was a lot of them. So if you have a product that appeals to those people, then it would certainly be a place to consider. As far as the racial makeup, the majority were white. I'd say about 60 to 70%, but there was a good mixture of different people. So that was one thing. Okay, let's see what else. Economically, as far as how much they were willing to spend, that was kind of interesting, because you know that as somebody who, if you make your product, that a lot of times people who make products can't afford to sell them cheaply. So there's the expectation, I believe, from this crafty crowd, where they know. I think a lot of them know, as opposed to just going to someplace else where they're expecting to get everything cheap. This crowd knows that you can't necessarily get things that are handmade cheaply. However, the problem is that there are a lot of people on the floor who also sell these things that are not cheap. So the amount of money that people are spending, it gets to the point where if they spent, $65 on something over here and another 40 over here, then they just don't have a lot of money to spend on other stuff. So I don't know if there's an unwillingness to spend their money necessarily, but I think just knowing that there are people who have products that are medium to high price, just because of the nature of the product, that is something that should be taken into consideration, because they may not have enough money to buy what you sell if it's a high price point. So for that reason, I would suggest probably coming with something that, even if it's not your main item, but something that you can sell for a low price, just so you can ensure that you get some sales. So they were willing to spend money, however. And I want to talk a little bit about the vendors who were there, so you can get an idea of what kind of products the consumer kind of has come to expect, because there are people who are coming back year after year after year, as well as so you can see what other vendors are selling, because the Pinners Conference, the vendors are very loyal as well. They come back on a yearly basis. Some of them not even so much a yearly basis. They go to different shows. They travel the Pinner circuit. They go to every show. I actually met a makeup artist who travels to every single show. She said, I do 9 shows a year, all the Pinner shows, and there's one more show that I do, and that's it. So, and you see a lot of vendors who say, oh yeah, I go to this show and that show and that show a lot. It's very common, which lets you know it's a pretty profitable show if they're going to do this, if they're willing to travel. So just to give you an idea of what people are expecting and what the vendors do. Also, I would say that Pinners is very loyal to the customers, meaning the vendors who've already been there. And they want to make sure that you get taken care of first. And they also want to make sure that there are not 10 people who are selling the same product, because they want to make sure that you're successful. And one thing before I forget that really stood out to me was I met a lady who said that her job was to go around to look at different booths. And if there's somebody who's having a problem bringing people in, her job was to stand out there. She said she could be out there for an hour just bringing people into the booth. And she's somebody who works for Pinners. And you don't find that. I don't think I've ever seen that at an event before, where they actually help you get people into your booth. So that was pretty amazing to me. So back to the type of vendors there are. Okay, there was someone who was selling his spices. He was interesting because he was a 3-year veteran, I guess you could say, of that particular event. So a lot of people came to expect him to be there. And he had loyal people who were like, I want to get this. I remember that from last year. I remember you from last year. So they definitely were consistently coming to his booth. Okay, we had somebody there who was selling DIY lipstick. You can make it yourself. And I'm going to just do a little go off on a tangent because make and take is something that's really important. This is a crafty event, so that people like to actually physically make the things themselves. And they have these little tables that are called make and take tables that are official make and take tables, where you can go. They pay you a little bit of money. You can sit down, make a candle, make something jewelry, or something of that nature. But then also, you don't have to have a make and take. Your booth is your booth. You can have people who can come there and you can guide them toward making things at your booth, just like the lipstick. Or there's some lady who had rhinestones, and you could create your own drinking vessel with the rhinestones, and it had you could customize it, and that was right there at her booth. So it wasn't an official make and take. And even for my perfume, it was something where you could go and you could literally make it yourself. So that's something that does really well. Things that have to do with making the customer making it themselves. Okay, so back to what I was talking about, the type of vendors who were there. There was someone who was doing online sewing lessons. Let's see what else. There was someone who had resin products. She had like keychains and ashtrays and things of that nature made out of resin. Let's see what else. There was a charcuterie board. She made the charcuterie boards out of wood in these really unique shapes. Let's see. There was someone who was doing metal cleaning, and I'm trying to think of it was so many things. And the floor was so big. So I'm just kind of thinking about what was close to me. Let me think. What else was over there? Oh, something that was really interesting was there was someone who had pearls, and you could get them out of the oyster, and you could have them set the pearl in your jewelry. So that was something that was really interesting. They had a candle make and take station. They had somebody who was selling candles, not too many. A lot of times you go to these events and everybody's selling candles. I only saw one person who was selling candles. And so, uh, okay, I really can't think of everything off the top of my head right now, but there was a very diverse group of people, things that you would never have thought about. Oh, there was a guy who was selling pickles. So he had pickles and sausage. And I would say that was really successful because, for one, it was unique. And number two, the food options were not very many because you had the concession stand that is always at the Cobb Galleria, as well as you had a little pop-up stand that was a Papa John's and Chick-fil-A, two separate stands. And those were really, I think that was the majority of what there was. So there was another guy who was selling rum cake. Yes, that reminds me. So there weren't many food options. So if you're somebody who sells food, that may be a good thing for you. So just to give you an idea of what kind of vendors were there. So all in all, I would say at the end of the day, I broke even, which can be somewhat disappointing, but I don't know if it was just a fluke where Saturday wasn't particularly as busy as everybody said it had been in the past. Not quite sure what happened. However, I can say that I really did enjoy the conference and I would do it again. It was something that if you're evolved enough not to just look at the money aspect of things, you can see that there were other benefits. The benefit of being able to be face to face with people who you can get feedback from about your product. The ability to meet people who were other vendors who told me about different opportunities, different ways to do things. The vendors were always sharing, oh, you can use this and you can do this, different things to help your business. Just meeting people and networking and connecting. And then also, it was fun. I really like being there. They give you 2 free classes per day, actually, where you can go attend the classes. I didn't get a chance to attend the classes, but it was just a fun conference. I really, really enjoyed it. And I would say that I would do it again. As far as takeaways of what I would change, there's not much that I would change because I think that I did what I was supposed to do. But if you are considering doing it and you think that you have a product that target market would be interested in, by all means, I would totally suggest you go to the Pinners Conference. I hope this helped and good luck with your business.